to start off with that great introduction, I will not be talking about our products at all. This is just more about the technology and where we see it going in the industry. And the title is a little bit misleading. I am going to touch on the chatbot AI side of things, but I really want to focus more on what micro-content can mean just in a broader general sense, how it can impact search results, the Internet of Things, other areas other than just automated systems. And I only have 25 minutes, but about 40 minutes of content, so this will go very quickly. All right, so the agenda, first we'll start off just what is micro-content? We've heard the term used several times today and yesterday, but what does that actually mean? And then I'll talk about a strategy going forward. What could you go home and starting on Monday, how could you start optimizing your content for a micro-content strategy? And then where can we see this going in the future? So starting off, first of all, it is confusing. If you Google search, you will find micro-space content, micro-content, all one word micro-content. But it's all coming back to the 1990s, believe it or not. Mr. Jacob Nielsen, a usability expert, has been credited not with inventing micro-content, but with the first to identify, hey, this is going to be important. And he described it as short content like headlines, which need to be immediately clear and inviting, but still make sense when removed from their original context. Now, it's amazing to me that he came up with that definition in 1998. That's more than 20 years ago. And it's still quite true. But beyond that, was micro-content really a new thing? I mean, even in the mid-1990s, we already had XML systems, SGML systems, content was being written in more modular ways. So again, it wasn't a new thing. It was simply identified as there's some cool things going to happen with this technology. All right, so enough of the 1990s. We'll go forward to this millennium. A blogger, Anil Dash, coined another definition, and I'm going to poke a little bit of fun here. That's kind of defining micro-content with macro-content. So if we take all of this and distill it down, what he really said was that micro-content conveys a single concept through an easily accessible link, and it's content written for any reuse possibility. Now, that last part is important. That is something that Jacob Nielsen didn't see 10 years earlier. So we're getting much closer to a proper definition. So what if we go even more forward, just 4 or 5 years ago? Well, Mr. Bosomworth defined it as short-form content, typically low-cost, high-value content. Oh, wait a minute, now we're getting very kind of buzzwordy. Appropriate to social channels. Well, we have to be careful. Warning. What does Mr. Bosomworth do? He's in marketing. So one word of caution. Micro-content means very different things to different people. And I don't know if this will translate culturally, but I made a very poor attempt at a joke here. A marketing manager, a web manager, an application developer, and a technical writer walk into a bar. What I'm getting at is it means different things to different people. So the worst thing that you can do is be in a planning meeting and somebody says, oh, we should really do micro content. Do not agree with them until they define what do they mean by micro content. What kind of reuse scenario are they talking about? The other thing before we can have a proper definition is micro content has evolved in two different directions. There is now these are not official terms, these are made up mic terms. There is public micro content. And I don't mean that it's not hidden away, it's micro content designed to be used by any external system. This is the kind of micro content that is used by voice interactive devices, by Google or other search engines, by any device that can scan that page. Then there's private micro content. Now that doesn't mean that it's behind a firewall. It still could be on the internet, but it's really designed to work within a single system. That's your chatbots, your artificial intelligence systems. They're designed to solve problems for specific customers in a specific situation. So, and this is why micro content, it's so difficult to define. It's evolving in different directions. And now one more concept before a very overly simplistic definition. I have a friend named Joe. Joe is about to go to work. Does Joe need to take his jacket? What is this crazy guy talking about? Well, Joe has a small decision to make, just like the hundreds of decisions we all make every day, and that has been known as a micro moment. We all have to face hundreds of these micro moments every day. And so the best definition I have ever seen of micro content solves these micro moments. That's all it is. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, without micro content, Joe might go to his computer, boot his computer, it's still booting, open up a web browser, type in a URL, navigate to the Weather Channel, type in his city, and find out, is it going to rain? Is it going to be sunny? That's a lot of effort. Or Joe could just look at his phone. And on a lot of modern phones, there's a little widget that is micro content. The micro moment was, do I need my jacket today? Pull out my phone, I just realized there's a problem with this. You don't see that. Okay, that's better. We'll get rid of that silly American Fahrenheit there. Now, the other thing to realize, and there's a lot of people who have a misconception about micro content, nobody wrote special content for that phone. So where did that come from? Well, if we go to the Weather Channel website, all of that information is already here. But there is some special metadata on certain elements. So the phone just queried the metadata and pulled that micro content. So there is no separate room of authors writing the micro content and then a room over here of people writing the website. It's all coming from one single source. All right, so talking about public micro content then, it's usually very specific, very targeted information sourced from a deeper resource. Normally, we don't want to write custom micro content in a public environment. It should be extracted from other existing content sources. It solves a micro moment, just like we looked at earlier, but it's also delivery adaptable. That could be shown on a phone. Alexa could speak that to you. It's just information that is pulled from a piece of source material. But the key thing there, it's designed to be available to outside systems. Once the weather channel has added the micro-content metadata, any external system can now pull that information and use that. So that's kind of a use case of micro-content I don't think gets enough credit. Now, private micro-content, that's your chatbots, your automated response systems. It is still very targeted information, but it's been pre-written specifically to address customer needs or customer questions. It's still to solve a micro moment, but it's usually about a product or a service, and often it requires some logic. Sometimes the customer doesn't know what they're asking. Hey, how do I do X? Well, the system might have to respond and say, well, are you on Mac or are you on Windows? It might have to actually request more information. So on the private side, a lot of micro-content is written specifically for the chatbot or the response system. All right, so that's kind of a background. To distill it all down, to me, it's just content that solves a micro moment. Now, strategy. I told you I wanted to give you things you could take home and use on Monday. Jumping to fancy code, yes, we will eventually do that, but that's not the place to start, especially on the public side. Start with the fundamentals. The better your long-form content is written, the easier it will be to add the metadata to support micro-content. If you have proper summaries, if you have proper headings, that lends itself to creating micro-content. We don't care about that, we're running out of time. So like I said, the better the authoring in the first place, the easier it is. And one of the neatest strategies I've ever seen, and this is going to sound simple, but there is a website called WikiHow, and when I was developing this, I did a quick test. I just went to Google and I typed how to tie your shoes. And one of the results I received was wikihow.com. Now, so I don't have to launch the web browser, I've taken a screenshot, and this is actually a very long article. It's not just one way to tie your shoes, they actually show you 4 different ways to tie your shoes. And the very first one, the beginner knot, it's not only instructions, it includes photos, videos, all of this extra information. Yet, when you do the Google search, if you're familiar with Google snippets, sometimes you don't even click a link to get your answer anymore. The Google search result has your answer. Well, despite all this information, when you do the Google search, you get steps. Here are the 6 steps to tie your shoes. But it references this page. What's going on here? Well, again, I said the better your content is written, the more it lends itself to micro-content. Notice that every step starts with a summary of the entire step. And the metadata was added. So all Google is doing is extracting that summary. Step 1, place the shoes. Step 2, tie a basic. Google is skipping all this media that's in the way. So they were able to do this only because it was well written in the first place. Now, not officially part of the presentation, but if you're trying to do something like this, be aware. It's confusing. There's not a lot of information out there. To show up as a Google snippet, first, you have to have good search ranking. Not number 1, though. That was surprising to people. You do have to be in the top 10. Whichever search result in the top 10 has the best micro-content gets to be that snippet that shows at the top of the search results. So there's actually 2 algorithms at work there. First, you have to get in the top 10. Then Google scans which of the top 10 has the best micro content. All right, so that's one example. Probably a more common example is I looked at more of a summary type of situation. So for this one, I was using some Wikipedia content. So I went to the Wikipedia article, Nuclear Physics, because that's so familiar to everybody. But in this long article, it all starts with this one summary paragraph. But that has been marked with metadata for microcontent. So now if you do the Google search on nuclear physics, well, you get that microcontent as the top of the search results. These are not difficult techniques. This can be done today in HTML5 content. It's like magic. No. We actually have to add the metadata. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky, though. There is no single standardized technique for doing this. There are a couple of conflicting techniques. Now, specifically for open systems, people usually either use microdata or microformats, and I'll explain both in a minute. Now, there is a third option, RDFA. Stay away from it. It's just not as popular as the others. I'll explain why in a minute. But microdata, some will consider the most powerful. What you do for microdata is you actually take your page, link it to another page. A very common one is schema.org. And what schema.org does, it will extend the metadata capabilities of HTML5. You get to add extra metadata. So as an example, let's say I've written a book and I put that on a website and I want people to find my book. Well, the problem is if the cover of my book is just a regular image and the title of my book is just as a heading or a paragraph, browsers don't know what that is. It's just an image and some text. However, if I go up into the body area and I link to schema.org, I can add a div, item type, book. Everything to follow is about a book. Item property, image. That's the cover of the book. Item property, name. That's the name of the book. So this extends simple HTML and lets us, in a legal and valid way, add the extra metadata that now makes this microcontent. Some people love that, some people don't like that at all. Anything that adds to HTML makes them nervous. Well, whoops, that is where microformats come in. If you don't want to add anything extra, then in a similar fashion, let's say I'm doing a Wikipedia article about botany, the study of plant material. I have my heading 1, I have my paragraph, botany is the study of, but then around that we add a div, class equals summary. So now we're using that div and that class to identify our microcontent. Some people prefer this method because it's not adding any additional extensions to HTML or HTML5. The good news, so most search engines like Google understand both techniques. So they will both work. It's just whatever best fits your content. Those two examples I showed earlier, Wikipedia would probably do it this way. The How to Tie Your Shoes article would probably do it the other way. But both will work. Ooh, down to 6 minutes. Okay. Now, I mentioned RDFA. It stands for the Resource Description Framework. It is another form of microdata. It's very similar to schema.org. The difference is RDFA is what is endorsed by the World Wide Web Consortium. So why don't we all use that? I don't know, it's just not popular. Nobody uses it. So it is the official recommendation, but it seems to be going down in popularity. So unless it's rewritten fairly soon, I probably would not use that. All right, now it gets tricky. That was all public use. Private use, chatbots, auto-response systems. The problem, at last count, there are more than 100 different chatbot or artificial intelligence engines for driving content. Some of them are open source, some of them are proprietary for purchase. None of them share a common markup. It's a bit of like the old browser wars time. So an example, one of the very first chatbots was called Alice. Do not use it, it is way too old now. But to have content in the Alice chatbot, you had to write in a language called AML, the artificial intelligence markup language. The people who created Alice just made it up. And that's the problem. Most chatbots use a proprietary markup. So what I would recommend, first, talk to your developers. Find out what markup they need. If they don't know yet, then you would typically create question-response pairs. And I would recommend, I know the slide says HTML5, I would go HTML5 or Markdown. Either of those should be easily transformed into whatever final requirement your chatbot system has. And that's just a sample of a typical question and answer, phrase and response type of interface. All right, now the future. I only have 3 minutes left. I'm going to talk about the future by talking about the past. We will see who here is as old as I am and as nerdy as I am. Oh, that's a horrible picture, but that's as high resolution as it gets. That is a picture from way back in the 1980s. Does anybody recognize that picture? Oh, come on, somebody must. Okay, I see a couple of hands now. This is officially the first image from a webcam in the entire world. Or at least that's what the credit they give it. It's not really, because technically the web did not exist yet. This happened before the web. But this was at the computer lab at Cambridge University. A computer science student who was on a floor working on a computer used to have to walk down a hallway, down a flight of stairs to go to the break room to get a cup of coffee. And they were tired of going all the way down to find out that the coffee machine was empty. So they created the world's first webcam just so they could see if there was coffee. That took a lot of work. They had to have a computer, custom software. They had to create an address system when the internet didn't exist yet. It was a very long-form process. Now, what does that have to do with micro-content? Well, think about today. Think about the Internet of Things. We could write a very quick script that could analyze this image and decide if the level's in the green area, we can get coffee. If the level's in the yellow area, we should hurry before somebody else gets the last cup. If it's in the red area, we're just going to stay in our office and wait for somebody else to make new coffee. That script could then write micro-content to a known address, and that could show up on my phone now. So that is where I think the huge potential is for micro-content. Yeah, chatbots are cool and all that, but just think about the Internet of Things. How much public micro-content could be used to just solve thousands of everyday micro moments. And so summary, we came up with a micro-content definition, a short strategy, but as far as the future, again, if you want to solve micro moments, that is the use case for micro-content. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Guys, questions?
All right, well, if there aren't any questions, I do see time's up. If you think of something you wish you would have asked, just swing by at the front or at the table out there and I'll be happy to help.
Yeah, you definitely know where to find Mike. Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much.